H-U-L-L-C-I-T-Y. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me I have Brad. How are you, Brad?
Good, thanks, mate. Good to be back on.
Yeah, good to have you. Good to have you. Look, it's good to be past the international break. It's always a bit of a killjoy, I guess, to have the international break. It's sort of, we're getting into the swing of the season, and then it sort of comes to a halt with that international break. So good to have football back this weekend. A few pretty important games coming up for us to discuss. But I guess we'll start with the game that we did have before the international break against Bournemouth. First clean sheet of the season, first point since the opening day. I don't think we had any shots on target, which I guess is probably the only downside from the performance. But against a pretty strong Bournemouth side, a pretty positive result, I guess.
Yeah, look, I think the shots on target might be a bit of a concern, but against a team that's, we'd be happy to get a point against, knowing, our climb into this league and obviously their decline. I think probably the only thing that was the fact, again, that it was at home, but based on our recent home form, a point's not a bad thing.
No, for sure. I think it was certainly more than I was expecting going into the game. In any case, I guess the other real positive as well was that we saw Tom Huddleston start in a City shirt for the first time in must be 3 or 4 seasons now, which was great to see, and he put in a pretty good performance as well.
Look, he did, and I think probably the thing that you appreciate is he's never been a pacey midfielder anyway, so that's fine, but he seemed to be moving well, and that very precise passing game of his will only improve as he gets more and more familiar with who he's playing with.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I think we'd sort of talked over the preseason when we were umming and ahhing about whether we signed him. I think that was sort of the key, that he's never been a particularly pacey player, so certainly hasn't lost anything in that regard as it stands. So look, he was probably one of the best on the ground, and I guess the key thing as well was he was a very strong presence in defence. Like there was a number of times where he was able to help clear the ball away from a pretty dangerous Bournemouth attack. So, even I can't remember if it was Logan or it might have been Dan who'd sort of suggested that even if it was the case that he played in almost a centre back position, maybe not that deep, but sort of protecting that pretty young back four that we have, it's a pretty useful role for him to play in the side.
Look, agree, mate. And the one thing that we sort of were really happy with at the end of last season was we had our experienced guys, the Honeymans and so on, that really led the way, but it was our younger players that really pushed the whole squad up. And having a guy who's got that experience, even if we get 20 games a year out of Huddleston this year and he's around some of those younger players, he's only going to be more and more beneficial for the squad, having a guy of that quality in there.
Yeah, certainly. And I guess sort of at the other end of that spectrum, we did have Tyler Smith debuted I think it was his debut for us up top as well. So signing from Sheffield United. Looks really promising. Great to have another young, hungry striker in the building. From all reports, Sheffield United supporters are pretty unhappy to have lost him, which I guess is always a good thing when you look at it like that, and looked pretty promising. So, good to have another option up forward other than Magennis Eves. He offers a little bit different, I guess.
He does, and probably the thing that, not knowing who he was or really much about him, he really moved well, and the way he sort of moved in between defenders. Obviously we weren't on the attack the whole game, but for a guy who, he certainly would be one of these guys that if we advanced up the table and really pushed teams in deep into their defence, he's going to be pretty crafty.
Yeah, certainly. And I guess the other one to mention as well is probably Matt Ingram. I mean, he came under a bit of fire after the Derby performance and then also the QPR performance as well, where sort of, I guess you could say, errors led to goals. But at the same time, I think I saw the stat that he's made the most saves in the championship to this point of the season, and it sort of suggests that he's not getting a whole lot of protection from the players in front of him. So I don't know how much you can blame him when that 1 shot in 10 gets spilled and results in a goal. If he's saving the other 9, he's doing a pretty good job. So another really strong performance from him against Bournemouth, I'd say.
Look, it was, and I think probably to be fair to him, like you said, he's been under the pump since day one, really. And the fact that he's made so many saves is probably not really that surprising when you look at our defensive efforts in recent times. But I think it was the Fulham game he made a bit of a howler. But other than that, he doesn't look out of place. And he really does appear to be a guy that you can bank on, which is all we want.
Yeah, no, that's it. And it's interesting as well with Baxter coming in from Chelsea. I guess the presumption might have been there that whilst Ingram would get his chance first up in goal, ultimately it'd be Baxter who'd be the first choice. But no, Ingram certainly made that step up and is really sort of giving no reason why he should be dropped.
Yeah, look, that's true. And I think, again, with Baxter, in a way, it may be just the depth side of it, but Ingram certainly hasn't done anything so far other than I think it might have been that Fulham game, a little bit of a howler, his positioning wasn't good. That's all that we've seen so far that makes you think, okay, hang on a minute. He's very competent, and I think the problem with Baxter, I think, is that Baxter hasn't had a lot of league football, if I remember, when I read something about him when he first signed. So at the moment, he can push all he likes, but Ingram has really still got the job as long as he keeps putting in the appearances he does.
Certainly, yeah. Look, also before we'll move on to talk about the transfer window that closed, but I'll give my sort of 3-2-1 votes for this game first, and then I'll grab yours as well, Brad. But it's probably that player that we've just talked about, Matt Ingram, as getting my 3 votes. I think he put in a fantastic display for City and was really sort of key in keeping that clean sheet. For the 2 votes, I'll go with Tom Huddleston, another player that we've talked about, who, again, was probably a pretty key figure in keeping that clean sheet for us. And if nothing else, than the fact that it was really great to see him in the City shirt in the starting lineup and really sort of justifying his place. It's not really that there was the worry that potentially that signing him was more of a token or nostalgic sort of signing, but he's really sort of proving his worth and his value in the squad as well. So well deserving of the two votes, I thought, for him. And then I'll go Tyler Smith on debut for the 1 vote. I think he put himself about really well, really looked quite a promising young player on his debut for us. And and look, I thought he was terrific. So I'll give him the 1 vote. How did you say it?
Yeah, look, pretty much the same. I think you could probably agree that the 3 would be who I would pick. It would probably be a little bit sort of different. I think Huddleston probably shone a bit more than Ingram, and that's only because I think Ingram did what he usually does and did a sort of good job. But I think at times there it showed with Huddleston, I sort of felt a little bit that he had to spend a little bit of time almost helping Smith out a little. And I think it probably showed to me, or like I said, I don't think he had the best game he's ever played, but I really think if you look against pretty quality opposition, him and Smith, he spent a bit of time looking sort of sideways to what Smith was doing. And I think when you said about his defensive cover, he really got in behind Smith a couple of times and helped him out.
Matt Smith,
so I think, Matt Smith. Yeah.
That's, we've got two Smiths on the
I know, I should clarify that.
Smiths for City.
Yes. So I agree at the moment that Huddleston or Ingram probably raffled. And I'd say Smith up front would definitely be, although I understand he didn't play the full 90 and came off a bit earlier, but there's something about him that reminds me a little bit of the way we ramped through that second half of last year, where we had strikers who could just move to the right positions from all over the shop, and we just looked like, there was games last year where in the first minute or 2 of the game we're already peppering. And against some of the poorer teams, that's what we're going to need. We need guys who can stick the ball in the net on a consistent basis. Otherwise, we're going to play 0-0 draws against bottom teams too.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we've got to find that spark to knock out. For example, that Derby game, losing 1-0, Tyler Smith is the sort of player, as you're saying, that gives us that bit of spark to maybe get a goal or 2 and really turn that performance around. So look, I think that's a really positive sign for him. And And sort of, I guess, on that topic, with the window closing, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you felt the window went as a whole for us. Were you sort of happy that? Did you feel there was any sort of areas, I guess, that we lacked in that we didn't fill in the window? I mean, for me, I think probably an extra centre back maybe would have been the only spot I could think of that we might have tried to fill, but otherwise pretty happy with the business.
Yeah, look, I think so. I think we probably all realistically sit there and sort of question, okay, where's the big signing? But there may even be a bit more maturity in the way we did the business this time, with the loans side of things as well. In the end, most of us that support the club want sustainability. We certainly don't want to get relegated, but we want to make sure that the players we bring in aren't going to cost us for 3 or 4 years if we do. And not to mention the fact that in the past, it's very easy to throw money at new players and keep bringing them in. But I do like the fact as well that we've got a bit more youth in there as well. I think at times last year, and I know I've said it a few times towards the end of last season, there was games there where when Honeyman didn't play, we looked different. And we've got to expect that sort of the older players and pretty much everyone in the squad's not going to last the whole season. And so that depth and youth side of things in that depth is probably really important. I probably expected a little bit more, to be honest, in the wider positions. I thought maybe even a winger that maybe could play on both sides, real sort of attacking side of things, could probably do us a little bit more. But other than that, I don't think you can complain too much with the squad as far as the evenness goes. But I still felt that maybe we could have just done with potentially having someone. I mean, I know we brought Harry Wood in, but I'm still sort of more thinking along the lines of someone who's an out-and-out goal-scoring winger, which we have been spoilt with a few in the last, well, not so much last year, but in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I think Monker's an interesting one. I think Monker could be. I mean, look, we've seen him played more through the midfield, I guess, because of Honeyman's injury so far. But I think when we first signed him, there was sort of talk that he could play in that more advanced position. But between him and Longman and Williams, I don't know I haven't really seen enough of them yet to get a good sense of where they fit in the side. I'm not convinced that Williams will make the step up straight away. Like maybe he will, but and look, we've only seen him a couple of times so far, but it seems like we've brought in a lot of attacking players without really knowing where they would fit into the side. And as you say, we don't have that sort of recognised goal-scoring winger that we've brought in, like last season when we had Gavin White on loan from Cardiff, and before that we had Adelican as well, who both offered that attacking threat up forward. We haven't brought someone in like that, I don't think. But look, Longman could be that player. It's just hard to tell at this stage.
I think Longman's quality. And I think probably the only thing that I kept thinking of is obviously the way we sort of set up with those sort of 2 central midfielders and 3 sort of push forward against Bournemouth. We know that, KLP is going to do it every day of the week. It was sort of like, well, if we had another, obviously, look, if we had another KLP, it'd be awesome. But if we had another player who could maybe even switch sides with KLP, just, mix things up a bit. So if we do play one up top, we are always pushing. And I think Longman's definitely got the capability to do a bit, but I sort of, maybe we're just spoiled a bit with the Grisickis of the world. We had guys and Bowens where we played these guys pretty much anywhere in that final third, not deep, and they just popped up and scored. And I think maybe that's a little bit of what I expected to find. But Williams, I think, if I remember, there was talk about whether he was more of a wing back anyway, who's just pushed forward more often. So that's sort of what I suppose. Instead of the wing back, I would have preferred more of an out-and-out winger / forward.
And look, I mean, we haven't seen Wilkes too much this season. I think he got injured against Preston on the opening day. So Wilkes could come back into the side and be that player who can swap wings with KLP a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. That's true.
But yeah, we'll see how we go with that one. All right. Well, it's your first crack at our new triple flashback feature, which I gave you a little bit of a heads up before the episode started.
You've done my head in already.
just to give you a bit of warning, I didn't want to trip you up too much live during the episode, but I did tweet out before the episode began for anyone listening in to try and have a guess for themselves. But Brad, I wanted to see if you could name the 3 players that we have shelled out the most money for. So the 3 highest transfer fees paid by Hull City for players in our history. And I can give you clues if you need them.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'll get this in order anyway. And I did, as I said to you previous to the show tonight, I definitely wanted to guess just to test my own methodology rather than do the old Google search. But I do remember Hernandez costing us quite a bit. So I would say he would have been up there. And I think if I remember, it was about the same time, obviously, we got Huddleston and then Livermore, that they were up there as well. But by up there, I'm not saying they're definitely number 1 or 2, because I'm pretty sure Grosicki cost us a bit as well. So at the moment, I might need a clue as to who definitely rounds out that top 3, but I would say Hernandez definitely. And then I think someone like, I think we might have even paid more for Jelavic than Livermore or Huddleston. So I think I'm probably getting close, but I bet you I've forgotten someone.
So you're definitely on the right track with one of Huddleston and Livermore. So Livermore actually cost more than Huddleston. He was £8 million. Huddleston was, I think, £5 or £6 million.
Oh, okay.
But you were right on Hernandez for number 2. So Livermore was 3rd. Hernandez was 2nd for £10 million. The first, who you haven't actually named in that group, cost us £13 million. It was the season under Mike Phelan.
Okay.
And he only played, he did play a bit under Marco Silva as well before being sidelined with injury, if that's a bit of a clue. Has since left the club and managed at Tottenham.
No, it's got to be Mason.
There you go.
Right.
So
he was the highest. Yeah, he was.
Like, that's a bit obvious. Yeah. So Mason was £13 million, which is
wow,
pretty remarkable when you think it. Look, it's a huge fee when you think that season that we went up and we obviously had the infamous game against Leicester with 11 fit players or 12 fit players or whatever it was. Didn't spend anything in the window, and then I think even Marshall coming in. Marshall was like £5 or £6 million as well.
Yes.
So we sort of didn't spend any money, and then in the last couple of weeks of the window just went crazy and didn't even spend it very well.
Well, it was good business for Spurs, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a couple of seasons we went in for Huddleston, and then we went in the next year for Livermore, and then 2 seasons later went in for Mason. So they must have been pretty sad that we haven't been back up to the Premier League since then.
That's true. Actually, I remember. So how much did you say Marshall was?
Marshall, I think he was £5 or £6 million. He would have been a bit as well. But I think
we obviously. Sorry, you go, mate.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it was between him and Mason was the big fees, and then Henriksen was a little bit, and then it was like, what's their names? We got Weir and someone else from United who I'm forgetting. Plays for Wigan now. He scored against us last season, I think. The name will come to me. No, I can't remember his name. But yeah, there was the two guys from United that came in as well that summer. But it was just the weirdest sort of set of signings. And actually, I just remembered as well, we got Mbakani in on loan that season, and over the national break, because there's been so little football on. There's been the African World Cup qualifiers that start at like 10 p.m. and so I've been sort of following along with those. And Mbakani's playing in those and scoring a bunch of goals. And I'm like, that's just an clue.
It is, isn't it?
It's a very weird window.
That it was not only a weird window, that period there. I mean, you look at who came in and who came out. The quality of some of those players was phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And I still look at the squad that we had when we got relegated that season. And you're thinking, it's a back line that included Harry Maguire and Andy Robertson, Marshall in goal or Jakupovic in goal. You had Ranocchia from Inter Milan on loan. You had Grzycki on a wing. You had so many good players, and it's such a shame that. Look, I think Phelan was probably a bit out of his depth, but you think if we'd had a Silva or a decent manager a bit earlier in the season, the squad itself wasn't actually that bad. It was just really mishandled.
Yeah, look, I think it was. And I think you'd remember we used to start the first podcast of the year with how many players have we actually got at training in the preseason squad. I think probably the biggest issue that year is, we got off to such a good start against Leicester and looked like we were, potentially going to go somewhere. But it's the squad. You're playing against teams, whatever it is, 3 games in a week around Christmas time, and I think you end up copying like everyone in that league is reasonable anyway, but you end up copying like Spurs and Man City in the same fortnight, but you've got injuries and it's generally, one of your better players is out. And I still remember, I think it might have been when we played Liverpool, I think.
Well, we beat
Liverpool at home.
Nias got the winner.
He did, that's right, because he was on loan from Everton, so he was a hero. It wasn't like we weren't there or competitive, and I think it was only actually, funny enough, Everton that year that gave us a hiding. The Crystal Palace one was a disaster. That
Palace at the end of the season and Bournemouth at the start of the season, yeah. But yeah.
We were very close in a lot of those games.
Yeah.
Probably was, yeah. Yeah. We just couldn't consistently beat those around us.
And we made the League Cup semi-final that season as well, which is crazy in itself when you think, a side that went down in the manner that we did to make a League Cup semi-final against United, where I think we beat them in the second leg. It's such a surreal season to look back on because we had that game against, I think it was Middlesbrough that we won 4-2 or something, where Maguire looked ridiculously good. Where you just think we had such a crazy, it was such a patchy set of results where you just think if we'd had any sort of consistency of form, it could have been a completely different season. But
and I think that was the hardest thing to swallow, is that we weren't really close.
Yeah.
We still had our chances towards the end, the right result going one way or another. But a mate of mine who's a Watford supporter still reminds me about the fact that he doesn't think Watford won a game in the last 2 months, and yet they still avoided relegation.
Yeah.
So, that shows you how bad things were at the time. But look, I'm glad we reminisced on that, mate, because I would never have thought of Mason at the top of the tree. You just forget about it. It's almost like Bullard.
Yeah, and it was Will Keane that I was thinking of as the guy that we signed from United as well. He's still at Wigan.
Okay.
There you go. Anyway,
Has
it's
he
a
got
good
the long hair
segue.
still?
Yeah, I think he's probably still rocking the man bun. It was a very distinctive thing. But no, look, it's a good segue. we beat Swansea at the start of that season, and we do have Swansea as our next opponent in the league. Russell Martin is their manager, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Russell Martin might have played for them at the time. I think he was a former Swansea player, unless I know he was at Norwich. I can't remember if he was at Swansea as well, but he's taken over at Swansea from Steve Cooper this summer. I think he moved to Swansea from MK Dons quite late in the window. A lot of talk about the fact that he has a style of play that's very Swansea-esque. He likes a lot of keeping the ball on the pitch, possession game, which is very much what Swansea are known for. But came in quite late, so it might take them a little while to get that style sorted out. The last time we played them was that 4-4 2 seasons ago, when we just signed a whole bunch of players. Wilkes had come in, Madison had come in from Peterborough. They all got on the score sheet. Eves got like a 95th minute equaliser and celebrated like it was the World Cup final winner. So it was a pretty frantic game in that one as well. But look, it's been an interesting start to the season for them. I think they've got 2 wins in their first 5 games of the season. So, it's an opportunity there. It's probably our first opponent since Derby, and then before that Preston. That's really a gettable game for us. We've had a few tough fixtures in between. So it's a real chance to sort of bounce back. It's been the international break. I guess another aspect to talk about as well, which we should probably talk about before the game, but we can talk about while we talk about the game, is Callum Elder, of course, playing for the Socceroos as well. So he'll be coming back into the squad pretty high spirits. It's a good opportunity to try and get 3 points.
Look, it is. And I think probably the one thing that we always like to think these sorts of games are the ones that we will pinch points. And the only thing that I think probably is different at the moment is it may just be that, and again, talking just back to Bournemouth, a 0-0 draw against Bournemouth where you barely get a shot on target doesn't sound exciting, but it was still Bournemouth. And they didn't exactly play us off the park. They might be a bit annoyed that they couldn't break us down or whatever, but there's probably a lot more positive out of that result than what a 0-0, what sounds like a dull draw, might actually sound like. And I think probably the only thing for us that's going to hold us in good stead is if we can take points against teams that are going to be somewhat frustrated. It shows a lot of the discipline that we've got. And I think probably that's what we're going to need against teams like Swansea, especially when they're, like you mentioned, they're trying to blend with a new manager and new formation and all of these sorts of things. Those well-drilled, well-organised teams are probably the ones that are going to find it easier to break those sorts of teams down, I would hope.
Yeah, certainly. So look, it's a pretty good opportunity for us. And I guess just on Callum Elder, I mean, it was great to see him play in the first game of the international break against, was it against China? I think we played, and then was unlucky not to get on the pitch last night against Vietnam. But great to see him debut for Australia.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think probably we already know how good he is. And most people in Australia probably don't really know how good he is. But I think at the moment anyway, the fact that he's getting those games in against who we would say is the bigger opposition and not looking out of place is great. So, yeah, it is. I think it's definitely going to hold him in good stead, definitely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll fill him with confidence, and it's been really unfortunate that, for instance, he didn't get to travel with the Socceroos over the summer break because of that injury that he sustained at the end of last season. He seems to have been quite unlucky a couple of times with injuries. So it's good to see him finally get that breakthrough against China. And then, yeah, we'll come back to the squad, full of confidence and really pumped up for the game against Swansea. I guess the other positive as well is that Wilkes and Honeyman should be back fit with the squad for this game. Really makes selections a bit interesting, especially in that midfield with Honeyman coming back in, because, I mean, I guess you'd sort of assume that Doherty and Honeyman are the sort of the natural first choice picks, but who would you sort of see as potentially that third? And I think Monkeur's suspension's now over as well, so he's another one to potentially come back into that trio with everyone fit and firing, I guess. So how would you see us line up in that middle three?
Look, it's probably interesting. And then I think it's sort of the game against Bournemouth, clearly I think McCann basically said we're playing sort of that holding two more so than, the holding one and then the two wider midfielders. And I think obviously the formation that he's not necessarily that adventurous with his formations anyway, but if he does stick with the same sort of structure as he started with Bournemouth, I can probably see that Honeyman might not just come straight back in. And I love him. I'm one of his biggest fans, but I still think as well that there's a bit there that, Honeyman's got real pace. He's real box to box, whereas Huddleston doesn't look as box to box, even though he does cover a bit more ground than we think. I can see how at the moment he probably won't tweak that Christmas tree so much by just rushing Honeyman back in. But like you said, with Monkeur's back from suspension, I think it all comes down to how fit they really are. Huddleston got some miles in the legs, looked pretty good, didn't look out of place. Do you really tinker with that too much? Or do you need to say, look, Honeyman's pace, a little bit of creativity on the feet of the defensive midfielders rather than longer balls or sweeping balls is probably a better way to go. So I honestly don't know. I'd say McCann's probably not going to ring too many changes. I think deep down McCann was really happy with last week. or the weekend before last, I should say. So I don't think he's going to tinker too much unless he's got something in his kit bag about the way to beat them, and this is how we've got to do it.
Yeah, and I think as well, the way that Swansea are going to play with that more possession style game, someone like a Huddleston will actually be quite good to break up their tempo and sort of control the passing from our perspective. So could be quite valuable in that sense. I guess the only thing I'd say in Honeyman's favour, particularly,
and just on that, mate, one thing that's been really interesting. Sorry, mate. One thing that has been really interesting is Swansea have leaked goals. So if it's really about getting 3 points, you might just find that there's a little bit more of a forward impotence in the way that McCann puts this squad together, because he wants to actually get them on the hook early and snatch one early to really put them on the back foot.
Yeah,
and we're not talking about top of the league teams either. We're saying, I think 3 or 4 goals a couple of times in the last 3 or 4 games. So, they're a bit vulnerable.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the other aspect to think about with Honeyman in particular is the set piece potential, that he was really strong on set pieces for us last season. And it feels as if we haven't offered too much of a threat from set pieces this season. So throwing him back in, I mean, I granted that Huddleston's probably another one that could take a decent set piece for us, but throwing Honeyman back into the side, for even just for his corners and set pieces, might just open another avenue of attack for us.
Look, it could. And the one thing you still remember is, when our team was in form last year, Honeyman was a rock. I think he played 35-something plus games. He was he's a machine. And that's sort of still very much what we need in the middle of the park now, more than even we needed last year.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it'll be really, and I sort of said this last season as well, it's going to be really fascinating to see how Honeyman goes in the championship this season. I think he sort of struggled a little bit towards the end of our relegation season, as in fairness did pretty much every player on the park for us. But he's really got a lot of confidence from last season, and he's really started to look like a leader and a player for us. So to see how he takes that step up will be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a pretty fair point.
Yeah. What's your score prediction for this one?
Look, we're playing away. So I think there's always this thing about when you're away, maybe you're a bit more free-spirited. I don't know. I still think that we're better than we've been showing in recent weeks, although the Bournemouth result, like I said, I didn't think was too bad. I think Swansea are actually probably I don't know. I find them defensively a little bit leaky, so I think I'm going to say we're going to beat them 2 or 3-1.
Well, I think in the spirit of talking about that 16-17 season where we went to Swansea and won 2-0, I'll go 2-0 for this one. I think I could see us doing them over as an echo of that game would be nice to see. So, yeah, I'll go 2-0.
Very good.
Very good, yeah. No, looking forward to that one in particular. We do also have a game against Blackburn midweek next week, which will be good. It's a really interesting set of 2 fixtures, I think, Swansea and Blackburn, because in a very similar way, Blackburn have also had a bit of a tumultuous off-season with Adam Armstrong going up to, or I should say down to Southampton, and not, as far as I've seen, not really brought anyone in to replace him. Sort of, they've got the rebranded Brereton Diaz, formerly just Ben Brereton, but, embraced his mother's Chilean heritage to be Brereton Diaz now. And it's the old footballing cliche of, it's like a new signing, because from all reports, he's come into that Blackburn side this season and looks a different player, and he's been a really potent attacking force for them. So he's sort of carrying the weight of that Blackburn squad on his shoulders. So that'll be an interesting game as well. I think there's a lot riding on it for Blackburn. I think supporters are sort of starting to run out of patience with Mowbray. So that could be an interesting fixture and an interesting sort of context to the fixture in itself. But I did notice, sort of looking it up, that they've won their last 4 games against us, which, obviously squads have changed a lot since those days, but always a nice sort of streak to break and get a result against them if we can. But how do you see this one?
I'm interestingly a bit more worried about the Blackburn game than the Swansea game. And it's not to say that Swansea are, a poorer club or anything like that. It's more just the fact that the way Blackburn are sort of setting up, and I know Mowbray's under pressure, but they've consistently scored a couple of goals when they've played. They have actually, I don't think they've had a clean sheet all year. But the one thing against us is that, defensively we've been pretty sound, but we've struggled to score. And I think, if anything, Blackburn's the team where it may go a little bit against what we're used to, but we're going to have to be a real counter-attack type side for 90 minutes against them. I just think Mowbray's throwing everything he can forward. I mean, the signings he has made are all that sort of maybe potentially the winger that we were looking for. Not that I'm saying I'd sign any of their players in a heartbeat, but nearly all the signings he's got recently, other than I think there was one defender he got from Brighton, he's sort of trying to really throw things around a little bit. And probably the thing that I thought was most interesting, just going back through some of their results, is I think they've scored in every game this year. And so for me, it's like, well, that's the team that really, we know they're going to score one, so we've got to score two. And that seems to be our problem. Whereas Swansea, I think they're still not as settled. We can break them a little bit. I still have this feeling that maybe Blackburn are going to be harder to, they might open up more, but we're going to be under more pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think that's a fair point. And yeah, look, just looking at it myself, no wonder I didn't think they'd really replaced Armstrong. They've only brought in one permanent signing, which is a left back. So, granted, they've brought in a couple of loan signings as well from the Premier League in a couple of Liverpool, Leeds and Brighton players. But I would think there's a bit of pressure mounting at Blackburn, or a bit of impatience mounting from the supporters as well. So it'll be a danger game in that sense. I think there's a lot riding on it for both sides. I think personally, looking at these two fixtures, if we could pick up 4 points, that'd almost be a best case scenario. I don't think we'll be able to get the 6 points out of the games. Obviously, that'd be fantastic if we can, but I think 4 points is probably a pretty reasonable hope for these two, I'd say.
Oh, definitely, mate. I would even say just the way these two games look, both away, a few days apart, I think 4 points would be great. I think even two. Yeah. 2 or 3 would be, job done. But potentially because we think that, these are the games we've got to just pick something up from.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's the main thing, looking at these two games as opposed to the Fulham and the Bournemouth games and things like that, where you look at these games, these are sides that'll be around us in the table, and getting early points on the board against them like we did against Preston will be pretty invaluable for setting up our season.
Oh, look, agree, mate. And just to hammer home your point there, the fact that they don't get 3 is just as important here as well. So the fact that we could play both of them and maybe draw both, get 2, well, that's the same level playing field against them anyway. So, and I think you're right. I think Blackburn aren't necessarily going to be well beaters. Mind you, their form guide's not too bad. It's still the fact that they're sort of rocking and rolling a bit.
No, that's it. So it's going to be a very interesting game. So I guess we're sort of maybe predicting a 1-1 in this one as sort of a hopeful scenario, I guess, going off the...
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Both same score?
Yep, definitely.
Fair enough. Well, look, it's going to be an interesting couple of games to look forward to. So thank you for joining me to chat about them.
Thanks for having me, mate.
No worries. And thank you, everyone, for listening in to another episode of the Tigers Down Under. We've got 2 great games to look forward to. Hopefully we can get a result in both of them and start rocketing up the table. But until next time, come on, City.